welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. For today's episode, we're going to look at Abimelech, one chapter in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 9, and Abimelech is the son of Gideon, who we recently talked about a couple of days ago. And so here we have Gideon. It's a long chapter. Let's just dive right in. Judges chapter 9, verse 1. Now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, remember that Jerubbaal means the one who contends with Baal, and that was the name that Gideon was given by the people after he cut down the altar of Baal and burned it. Anyway, so that's who he was. Now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them, to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, that all of the 70 sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. Now, we learned about Gideon a few days ago that Gideon married and had a lot of kids. And one of these kids was Abimelech, who is a descendant of his mother came from Shechem. And so at this point, Gideon's 70 sons, remember at this point, there's no king. It's still the book of Judges. And so Gideon has died. His reign of being a judge of Israel is over. And Abimelech's going like, look, do you really want all 70 of my brothers to rule over you? Or would it be better if me, one of the descendants of Shechem, one of the descendants of Gideon, rule over you? So that's what he's trying to do. Verse 3, and his mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech. For they said, he's our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal Berith. And so they're still serving idols here, with which Abimelech, this right here, by the way, this Baal is, we've already seen that in the book of Judges. We saw it in Judges chapter 8, verse 33. This is something to do with Gideon. We saw that this is where people were worshiping and this is where people were serving idols. And so Shechem is still serving this idol, even though Gideon has kind of routed the Moabites. And anyway, so they're still serving idols. And they hire Abimelech, or they pay Abimelech, and then look at verse 4, which Abimelech then hired worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. He went to his father's house in Ophrah, and he killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. All the leaders of Shechem came together, and all Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak at the pillar of Shechem. This will come up later, the pillar of Shechem. When it was told to Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim. Now, Mount Gerizim is mentioned for us in Deuteronomy 11, Deuteronomy 27, and Joshua chapter 8. Mount Gerizim is where, when Moses was about to die, before the people went into the promised land, he said, when you go into the promised land, pronounce all the blessings and all the curses over Israel, and all the blessings shall be pronounced from Mount Gerizim, and all the curses shall be pronounced from this other mountain. And so these two mountains, the people were supposed to stand on and pronounce all the blessings and all the curses. So this is a somewhat famous mountain. It's mentioned for us already in the book of Joshua, and then, of course, in the book of, you know what? Anyway, we'll get back to that later. I think that this was Joshua. I'll make a note of that in my blog. Sorry. So this is the blessings and the curses happening on Mount Gerizim, and this is where Jotham gets up on this mountain, and he said to them, listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees, this is the people of Israel, the people of Shechem, once went to anoint a king over them, right? They're hiring Abimelech, they're putting him in charge. And they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and hold sway over the trees? So the tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the other trees? And the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave the wine that cheers God and men and go hold sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you are anointing me as king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out from the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now, this is a really interesting kind of prophetic thing. And I've always liked this little section here. And the language of the trees is used a lot in the prophets. And so there are a lot of prophets who will use the language of the trees, talking about Israel, talking about Egypt, talking about Assyria. And so this is an interesting one. And he's saying that the Israelites, came and were looking for a king. They went to the olive tree refused them. They went to the fig tree refused them. And they went to the vine, and the vine refused them. What you might remember from a couple of days ago is that the people came to Gideon and said, hey, you be king over us. And Gideon said, no, not myself, nor my sons will be king over you. So that's kind of what this guy is speaking to, the son of Gideon. That's kind of what he's speaking to here. But then the trees came to the bramble. And this is a picture of Abimelech. Abimelech's this bramble. He's just a branch. And they said, come and reign over us. And he goes, look, if you've done this in good faith, then come and take refuge under my shade, which is a funny image because it's not a tree, it's a bramble. It's just a little twig. And he goes, or I don't even know how you'd say it because it's not even a vine. It's like worse than a vine, right? Because we've already had the vine before that. And he says, but if this isn't insincerity, then let fire come out from the bramble and devour the cedars. Now, therefore, he says in verse 16, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved, right? They've had his 70 sons murdered. So he's saying, if you did right by Jerubbaal, if you did right by his family, and if you really mean the right thing by making Abimelech king, which is all obviously no, because they murdered the sons of Jerubbaal, he goes, then... And he says, my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian. And you have risen up against my father's house this day. You have killed his son, 70 men on one stone. You have made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he is your relative. If then you have acted in good faith, which clearly they haven't, if then you've acted in integrity, which clearly they haven't, with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. In other words, let Abimelech be the downfall of the people of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let Beth Millo and Shechem be the downfall of Abimelech. Then Jotham ran away, fled, and he went to Beer, and he lived there because of Abimelech his brother. Now, verse 22. Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years. Okay? And God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. Now, we're going to see this again in a little while when we get into 1 Samuel chapter 16, and then we'll see it again in 1 Kings 22, this idea of God sending an evil spirit between Abimelech and Shechem. It's important to note that the people of Shechem are idolatrous. It's important to note that Abimelech has rejected God, and he's idolatrous, and now God is sending an evil spirit between them to cause them to distrust and dislike each other, so that ultimately this prophecy of Jotham can come true, that because of Abimelech, the people of Shechem are destroyed, and because of Shechem, Abimelech will be destroyed. And so people freak out and they go, man, God sent an evil spirit between these two people groups. Remember, these were not people who were trying to serve God. Remember that first. The second thing that you want to remember is that all spirits are subject to God. All spirits, all powers, even the devil himself is subject to God. They are submissive to God in heaven. And so that's really important to remember. And so there's a prophecy that's already taken place that Shechem is going to be the end of Abimelech and Abimelech is going to be the end of Shechem. And God is bringing that about by sending an evil or a harmful spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. So it goes on to say, let me read this again, verse 23. God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. And so what's going to happen is Abimelech is going to come and he is going to attack Shechem. He's going to come down here. There's this whole battle scene, and he's coming up to attack Shechem. So let's pick up in verse 42. Because kind of the in-between part is Abimelech getting his army ready, and the people of Shechem, this new ruler in Shechem, kind of coming against Abimelech. And so the battle's about to take place. So pick up with me in verse 42. On the following day, the people went out into the field, and Abimelech was told, and he took his people and divided them into 3 companies, and he set an ambush in the fields. And he looked and he saw the people coming out of the city, so he rose up and he killed them. Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, while the 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the field and killed them. These are the people of Shechem that he's putting to death. Okay, verse 45. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he captured the city, and he killed the people who were in it, and he razed the city and sowed it with salt. And when all the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard of it, they entered the stronghold of the house of El Berith. A couple of things here. Okay, one. the Tower of Shechem is what we already saw earlier in the chapter, which is where Abimelech was appointed kind of to be king and ruler. The second thing is, instead of Baal Berith, now we have El Berith. It's a different name, but it's the same place. It's the same idolatrous temple. And so Abimelech was told that the leaders of Shechem had gathered together into the tower. Now look at verse 48. Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, he and the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bundle of brushwood, some brambles, if you will. And he took it up and he laid it on his shoulder, and he said to the men who were with him, "What you have seen me do, hurry and do as I have done." Now remember, this is 3 years after his brother Jotham has made this prophecy. Verse 49, so every one of the people cut down his bundle and followed Abimelech and put it next to the stronghold, and they set the stronghold on fire over them, so that all the people of the Tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. Do you remember what the prophecy was that we just read a few minutes ago? If you have in integrity and in honesty and in justice ask this bramble to rule over you, then I hope everything goes well with you. If you have not done it in integrity, then may fire come out from the bramble and destroy you, and may you destroy him. And so this is that coming true 3 years later. The people of Shechem had gathered in the tower. He's already put everybody else to death in the city, and he goes and he sets the tower on fire. Verse 50, then Abimelech went to Thebes and encamped against Thebes and captured it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and all the men and all the women and all the leaders fled to it, and they shut themselves in and went up to the roof of the tower. Now, this is not a city that was supposed to be attacked according to the prophecy we read. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire. And a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. So a couple of thoughts here really quickly. Depending on the kind of a kind of millstone that you would use. Some of them were really big and they would be controlled by oxen. Some of them were smaller and you would have like a piece of stone, and so you could grind grain and you can do those sorts of things. And so there was the lower millstone, which was really huge and really heavy, and then there was the upper millstone that would be used kind of like a wheel to go around and crush the grain. Really big ones, you can Google this and see, really big ones were attached to a wooden bar and then an oxen, so as he's moving around the big upper millstone, but that would be way too heavy for an individual probably to lift by themselves. And so this is probably a smaller grain crushing device, and the woman takes the upper millstone, heaves it over the side of the tower, strikes Abimelech in the head, and crushes his skull. But it doesn't quite kill him, because look at what verse 54 says. So he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said, "Draw your sword and kill me, so they won't say a woman killed me." And his young man thrust him through with the sword so that he died. Abimelech does not want to have been killed by a woman. And so he's like, look, just stab me through, dude, so that they can't say a woman killed me. Here's what's funny. In 2 Samuel 11:21, King David will reference this story and say, wasn't his head crushed when a woman threw a stone off of a tower and killed him? So Abimelech does not get his way here. He will always be remembered as the man who a woman killed, and we even talk about him that way. And so this is the end of Abimelech, and it's the end of the prophecy, right? So let the bramble destroy Shechem, and let the people of Shechem, let them be the end, let them be the downfall ultimately of Abimelech. And then in verse 55 it says this, when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, everyone departed to his home. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he had committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. So this is the fulfillment of the curse that we saw earlier in the chapter. But remember, first half of the chapter was 3 years ago. The second half of the chapter, 3 years later, right? So we've got this 3-year span, and it's sometimes it's hard for us to catch that and to pay attention to it in our reading. So just don't overlook that. Now, this is Abimelech. This is this wicked person, this wicked, son of Gideon, Jerubbaal. Remember, Jerubbaal did not want to reign over the people, but the staff that Jerubbaal made, the people worshipped and exalted. And then we have Abimelech rising up and saying, hey, let me lead you. And that was just bad all the way around. We're going to pick up tomorrow with a judge named Jephthah. And if you want to read ahead, I encourage you to read Judges 10 through 12, and we will look at his life then. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible. Together, you and I have looked at another passage of Scripture and come to know the Bible a little bit better and enjoy God more fully. This video, along with all of our videos, can be found at simplerbible.com, where you can enjoy our Through the Bible in a Year course. You can also enjoy a wealth of resources, blog posts that take you a little bit deeper into the text, a Bible study format that you can use with your small groups or your family, and we're creating new content all the time, all with the commitment to help us be people who know and enjoy God more fully. Thank you so much for being part of it, and we can't wait to see you next time.